A classroom goes silent. One student lowers their head, hands clasped tightly together, eyes closed, whispering something no one else can hear. Across the room, another student watches, confused, maybe uncomfortable. The teacher notices, pauses, says nothing, because in that exact moment, something invisible just entered the room. Not just religion, but a question. Is this freedom or pressure? Because to one student, this is a personal act. To another, it feels like something they didn't choose to be part of. And to the school, this exact situation has triggered lawsuits, protests, and nationwide arguments for over 60 years, all from something as simple as a quiet prayer. So before we go deeper, subscribe if you want more videos that break down real-world debates like this without easy answers, because this one doesn't have one, and the deeper you look, the more complicated it gets. At first, the question sounds simple. Should students be allowed to pray at school? But this isn't really about prayer. It's about two ideas that don't fit together as easily as they sound: the freedom to believe and the freedom to not be affected by someone else's belief. In the United States, both are protected, both are considered fundamental, and both can clash in the same classroom. So in this video, we're going to break this down, not as opinions, but as a system, step by step. We'll go through the hidden rules, real situations, and legal boundaries that actually decide what's allowed and what crosses the line. Because what most people think is happening is not what's actually happening, and it starts with the biggest misconception of all. Most people believe that prayer is banned in public schools, that somehow students are not allowed to pray anymore, that religion has been removed. But that's not actually true. Students can pray, legally, at any time, before a test, during lunch, sitting quietly at their desk. No law stops a student from bowing their head and praying silently, because the Constitution protects that. This is called the free exercise of religion. It means your beliefs are yours, and the government, including schools, cannot take that away. So the idea that prayer is completely banned isn't accurate, and yet millions of people still believe it is, which creates something dangerous. Because when people think a right is being taken away, they fight to bring it back, even if it never left. But here's where things start to shift, because the moment prayer stops being just personal, everything changes. At first, prayer looks simple. One person, one belief, one quiet moment. No one else involved. No problem. But the moment a second person joins in, it becomes something else. Now it's no longer just personal, it's shared. And that's where the line starts to blur. Because group prayer sounds harmless, even positive. People gathering together, expressing beliefs, supporting each other. But inside a public school, that changes the situation completely. Because a school is not just a place, it's an institution funded by the government. And that means it has to follow a different rule. It cannot promote or appear to promote any religion. This is called the Establishment Clause, and it creates a tension. Students can believe anything, but the school itself must stay neutral. So when prayer becomes organized, scheduled, or encouraged in a group setting tied to the school, it starts to look less like personal freedom and more like institutional support. And that's where problems begin. Because now the question is no longer, can you pray? It becomes, who is leading it and who feels included? And that question becomes even more intense when authority enters the picture. Imagine this. You're standing on a football field. Game just ended. Everyone's tired, emotional, adrenaline still high. Your coach walks to the center, drops to one knee, bows his head, starts praying. No one says you have to join. No one forces you, but everyone else slowly gathers around. So what do? Stay standing? Walk away? Or join, even if you don't believe? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Authority changes everything. A student praying is one thing. A teacher or coach praying is something else entirely. Because they hold power, grades, playing time, approval, and even if they don't intend to pressure anyone, their position creates it automatically. This is why courts have repeatedly stepped in, because when authority figures lead or visibly encourage prayer, it can feel less like a choice and more like an expectation. And that's the conflict. Is it a coach expressing personal faith or a leader influencing students? Because the answer depends on perspective, but for the student standing there, the pressure feels real either way. And that leads to a deeper problem. Because even when something is labeled optional, it doesn't always feel that way. Optional. That word sounds safe. neutral, like a choice. But inside a school, optional doesn't always mean free, because humans don't make decisions in isolation. They look around, they read the room, they try to fit in. So imagine that same moment again, a group prayer after a game, everyone slowly joining, some willingly, some automatically, some just not wanting to be the only one standing alone. No rule forces you to participate, but something else does. Social pressure, the fear of being different, of being noticed, of being judged. And this is where the situation becomes almost invisible, because technically, no law is being broken. No one is forcing anything, but in reality, the experience feels very different. Students have reported joining prayers, not because they believed, but because they didn't want to stand out, didn't want to risk being seen as disrespectful, or worse, excluded. And that's the problem, because the Constitution protects freedom of belief, but it also tries to protect people from being pushed into someone else's belief. And when pressure becomes invisible, it becomes much harder to regulate, which is exactly why these situations don't just stay inside schools. They end up in courtrooms. This debate didn't start recently. It goes back decades, to a moment that changed everything. In 1962, a case reached the US Supreme Court, Engel versus Vital. At the center of it was a simple, short prayer, written by school officials, recited in classrooms, voluntary, non-denominational. On the surface, it seemed harmless. No one was forced to say it, but the court saw something else. They ruled it unconstitutional, because even a voluntary prayer, when organized by a public school, crosses a line. It turns the government into something that appears to support religion, and that was not allowed. That decision shocked the country. Many people saw it as removing God from schools. Others saw it as protecting freedom, and that moment set the foundation for everything that followed. Because from that point on, the rule became clearer. Students can pray, but schools cannot lead it. And yet, that didn't end the debate. If anything, it made it louder. Because for many people, this wasn't just about law. It was about something deeper, something they felt was being lost. For some people, this debate isn't really about rules, or court decisions, or legal wording. It feels personal, because to them, prayer in school represents something bigger: tradition, identity, morality, a sense that there used to be a shared foundation, and now it's fading. So when they hear that prayer is not allowed in schools, it doesn't sound like neutrality. It sounds like something has been taken away, and that's why movements keep appearing. Petitions, school board debates, political campaigns, all pushing for one idea: bring prayer back. Because from this perspective, removing prayer didn't create neutrality, it created a void, and that void feels uncomfortable. But here's where the conflict sharpens, because what one group sees as restoring something important, another group sees as a serious risk, not of religion itself, but of being excluded by it. Now imagine being in that same classroom again, but this time, you don't share the same belief. Maybe you follow a different religion. Maybe you don't follow any at all. And suddenly, a moment that feels normal to others feels different to you, because you're no longer part of the majority. And that changes everything. Prayer can feel unifying when everyone believes the same thing, but in a diverse environment, it can divide instantly. Because even a simple prayer raises quiet questions. Is this my space too? Do I belong here? And no one says anything out loud, but the feeling is there. That subtle shift, where one group feels included and another feels slightly outside. And that's the risk. Not conflict, not arguments, but quiet exclusion, which is much harder to see and much harder to fix, because schools are supposed to be neutral spaces, places where no one feels like an outsider. But when belief becomes visible, neutrality becomes fragile. So the system tries to draw a line, a very specific one, between what is allowed and what crosses into something else. So where exactly is that line? What is actually allowed right now? The answer is surprisingly precise. Students can pray, alone or in groups, as long as it's truly voluntary and not organized by the school. They can read religious texts. They can form clubs. They can talk about their beliefs. All of that is protected. But the moment the school gets involved, even slightly, the situation changes. A teacher leading prayer? Not allowed. A school organizing a prayer event? Not allowed. Even something that looks like encouragement can cross the line, because the rule is simple in theory. The school must not endorse religion, but in reality, that line is extremely thin and easy to cross without realizing it, which is why, even when everyone thinks they're following the rules, controversy still happens, because real life doesn't follow clean boundaries. Because real situations are messy. Take something like a graduation ceremony, a once-in-a-lifetime moment, families watching, students standing together one last time. And someone suggests including a prayer. Not required, just a short moment, voluntary, respectful. Sounds simple, but it immediately raises questions. Who writes it? Who delivers it? What belief does it reflect? And what about the students who don't share it? Now the school is no longer just allowing expression. It's creating a moment that includes religion, and that's where lawsuits begin. Similar situations happen at football games, student-led prayers over loudspeakers, moments that feel spontaneous, but are still part of a school event, religious clubs meeting on campus, teachers present in the room, each case slightly different, each one sitting right on the edge of the line. And courts don't always agree. Some rulings allow certain forms, others strike them down, because the difference between private and school-sponsored is not always clear, and that uncertainty keeps the debate alive. Because no matter how many rules exist, people will always test the edges of them, which leads to the deeper question behind all of this. Because at its core, this was never just about prayer. It's about something much harder to define. Where does freedom end and influence begin? Because the same action can be seen in completely different ways. A student praying quietly? Freedom. A group forming around that prayer? Community or pressure. A teacher joining in? Support or authority. And that's the paradox. The Constitution protects two ideas at the same time: the right to express belief and the right to not have belief imposed on you. But those two ideas don't always stay separate. Sometimes they collide. And when they do, there's no perfect answer, only trade-offs. Because protecting one side completely can risk harming the other, which is why this debate has never truly ended, and probably never will. So go back to that classroom, the same moment, one student, head down, quietly praying. Nothing loud, nothing forced, just a personal act. But now, you see it differently, because that single moment exists in two realities at once. To one person, it's a basic freedom, something that should never be questioned. To another, it feels like the beginning of pressure, something subtle but real. And the school? It stands in the middle, trying to protect both sides without fully satisfying either. And maybe that's why this debate feels so intense. Because it's not about something distant. It happens in everyday places, classrooms, fields, hallways, moments that seem small but carry weight far beyond them. So the question isn't just, should students be allowed to pray at school? Because they already can. The real question is, at what point does a personal freedom become something that affects everyone else? And where should that line be drawn? Because depending on where you stand, the answer changes. So now it comes back to you. Do you see this as freedom or something else? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of real-world debates like this, subscribe, because some of the most interesting questions don't have clear answers.